Welcome to the program. I am Omini Odan. Where will you rather be at every point of any initiative in the public sector or in the private sector? If you're involved, you think proactively. But if you refuse to be active in it, you are always fighting from the back because you complain they have left you behind. So, today on Insight, we shall be looking at social protection in Nigeria, but specifically the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office, NASCO. How well are they coordinating the various social protection initiatives by the government? Somewhere along the line, we shall be looking at Social Protection Cross-Learning Summit. That summit is coming up, and we are told that that summit is going to take a look, bring together all practitioners, beneficiaries of the social protection program. How well are they going towards a proper mainstreaming and harmonization of the entire process? You will not want to stay steps away. It is not only discussion segment on the inside, we have the media review segment. Cecile?
Yeah, on the media review segment, we shall take a look at the resumption of the Nigerian National Assembly, the 8th National Assembly. We want to look at, despite the whole political gymnastic among members and their parties, is it going to affect the smooth running of the remaining part of this assembly? And of course, will bills also be affected? These and many more we'll be talking about on the media review segment.
I know within the political space, a lot will say the real beauty of democracies in the parliament.
Yes, I believe. Of course, the correspondent covering the National Assembly, who will be our guest, will give us an inside opinion on what he thinks is going to be like.
Yeah. So that's the tip of the iceberg. Stay on and get it insightful today. Up next on the program is the discussion segment. The Nigerian government is being financed by the World Bank in costing for the National Social Safety Net project. This project is coordinated by the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The fund is applied partly as proceeds for the engagement of independent experts to verify output-based financing activities like development of the building blocks of the safety net system, implementation of a targeted cash transfer with the objective of ensuring that the resources of the operation are administered and utilized in accordance with the terms and conditions agreed in the financing agreement. We'll look at the project, but in the course of the program today, we shall be looking at a program that is coming up somewhere later in the month, the Social Protection Cross-Learning Summit, SPECS 2019. My guest to do justice to our discourse on this segment of the program today is the National Coordinator of the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office, NASCO, Iowa Apera. Thanks for joining me on Insight.
Thank you for inviting me. Okay. My pleasure.
When we hear of the social safety net in Nigeria, a lot of confusion comes in. Maybe you're here to clear it. Coming from the NASCO office, I understand that NASCO, that is the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office, coordinates everything about the project. So what really are you doing coordinating these platforms?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. Welcome, viewers. The National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office is an establishment under the Office of the Vice President, supervised by the Special Advisor to the President on Social Investment, okay, Hajia Mariam Uwais. And the mandate of NASCO is to coordinate the social safety nets programs of the federal government. At the moment, there are 3 social safety nets programs of the federal government. One is the Youth Employment and Social Support Operations, YESO. The other is the National Cash Transfer Office, and then the other one is the Community and Social Development Program, CSDP. The second mandate of NASCO is to build the social register for Nigeria of poor and vulnerable. And the social register is a database from which beneficiaries are then mined for social intervention programs like the cash transfer program and the youth and the Skills for Job program for the Youth Employment and Social Support Operations ESO program.
Okay. Well, in the spirit of the SDGs, that's the Sustainable Development Goals,
Yes.
it talks about getting everybody involved.
Yeah.
And I want to be concerned here. You have mentioned 3 major projects. Where is the place of the elderly? Is the elderly involved?
Now, part of the mandate of NASCO is also to support the federal government to design programs and intervention coming from the point of view of the data that we're getting from the social register. It is emerging in the social register that we have a number of single households who are aged, those who are perhaps 75 and above, who are in our villages without anyone to look after them or take care of them, and are being identified by their communities as being poor and vulnerable. Now, as we get the numbers, part of our remit is to be able to design an intervention that will speak to the elderly. So it could be social insurance, could be health insurance, could be any of the programs. But what we do is to look at the data and look at what information we have, and we are able to recommend or suggest to the federal government that perhaps this is a program you need to look at. Perhaps it's a program that will be suggested to the federal government.
Is the plan in place, or you intend to?
By our mandate, with the plans will always be in place.
Okay.
Because as you interact with the data, data is it's an information gateway that you can do a variety of things with. Okay. As things emerge, as you interact with the data, you would be able to say this is where we want to go. Okay. And it's emerging, and strongly too, that we have a number of single households in the social register of the elderly, people who are above 75, who are there in the villages, staying alone, no one to look after them. They are poor, they are vulnerable, of course. And so what could be our suggestion or a design to the federal government, to those who will make the decisions? We say, okay, we need to plan for an intervention for the elderly, for instance. Let's plan for a free health care program for the elderly, thereby designing a small social intervention program that gives them access to free health care, for instance. Okay. Or a welfare program that gives them a monthly stipend, for instance. And that there are a variety of social interventions that you can put them into. Okay. But you're coming from the evidence point of view that they exist. They are identified by their communities, because the social register is built on the community selecting, identifying the poor and vulnerable amongst the community. It's not a list written by anyone, sitting anywhere.
Maybe we'll get to that aspect, so I don't exhaust all the time. But I know that by the numbers, given the projection of the National Bureau of Statistics, in a matter of 3 years, the population of the aged in Nigeria, the aging population, not minding the bands, may be hitting 9.7 million or thereabout, if programs like this are not properly fashioned out to take care of them. And we hope and believe that maybe you will not be thinking of going it all alone. You have plans to also involve some established NGOs in the country who are already doing a lot of work regarding the aged in Nigeria.
Of course, the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office, our mandate is very clear in building the social register. Okay. Now, the social register is an information gateway of potential beneficiaries to any social intervention. So we build the database, and it is open to all comers. It's open to government, it's open to private companies and philanthropy, it's open to NGOs, who will then come and mine their beneficiaries, knowing that this is done in a very transparent manner and selected by the community members themselves. Okay. So for the first time in this country, and by the leadership that we have currently, we're able to develop a register that is from, perhaps you say, the bottom-up approach, taking it from the community members themselves. No one has sat anywhere to write names of people that are in this register, but it's the community members themselves that come together. And like you said, I will have an opportunity to explain exactly how we generate the register.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I hope the register you're building is the register of the real numbers, not estimated numbers.
No, it's the real numbers. At the moment, we have 655,005
Wow.
poor and vulnerable households in the register across 26 states of the Federation.
Is it a pilot?
It is not a pilot.
So why
it is a
26 states?
full-blown. We are in all 36 states and Abuja.
Okay.
But we're in the process of developing the register across the states. We're at various stages.
Okay.
And I could also explain to you exactly why some states we have developed the register and others have not yet come on the National Social Register. But it's a whole lot of process.
Okay.
And even in these states, we start first with a 30% poorest local governments, and then we go on. And like you gave statistics of the of in 3 years' time, we might hear the 9 million mark in the aged.
9.7.
9.7. So it is with the social register.
Yep.
We've started now, and we are estimating in the next 5 years. We
But
should
I
be.
just hope also that everybody's involved.
Everybody's involved.
Talking about
And if I explain the
inclusiveness now.
process, you will understand that everybody's involved.
Okay,
So when we get to a community to raise the social register, first we split the entire community into 3 focal group discussion. One for the youth, one for the women, and one for the adults, the male adults. All these 3 groups within their own community define in their context what is poverty, who, and then they identify who amongst them is adjudged indeed poor and vulnerable.
Okay.
These households are identified by the communities themselves. A list is then generated. All 3 groups come into a plenary where all 3 groups then harmonize the list. So the women, here is our list of poor and vulnerable homes. The youth, here is our list of poor and vulnerable homes. The male adults, here is the list of our poor and vulnerable homes. The 3 lists are collapsed into one. For our community, here is a list of poor and vulnerable homes. Once that is agreed by the entire community, the community sign off on this list.
Okay.
A copy of that is retained at the community level.
Okay.
We take another
cut
copy. Yes.
What are the safeguards you have put in place? For instance, government means well for the people, talking about Nigerians.
Yeah.
And this project, this policy, this program is for all Nigerians. But there's a tendency, you're planning very well up here in Abuja. You have your foot soldiers on the field to implement this policy. There's a tendency that some persons want to truncate government's effort by making it a political thing. I hope it is not a political thing.
It is not a political thing,
But
and
there should
never
be
will be.
safeguards like this, yes.
Yes. So we sit at the federal level here to coordinate and provide standards and guidelines and frameworks for the operations. But the actual work is done in the community. And we have state operating offices. So the first thing we do is to enter a memorandum of understanding with all state governments, signed by the state governor himself with us, that for our state, here is our agreement with NASCO. We will commit to doing this. We will deploy civil servants to this number, to this quality, into this office to man the affairs of this office.
Yeah.
We make a commitment to provide the funds from the World Bank.
I get your
That's one of
point.
the World Bank.
Very,
to
very
that.
beautiful plan.
Right.
Now, the issue is that, let me put it clear. You
Yeah.
have states dominated by either APC or PDP or ABGA or name it. I can't list all the political parties right now.
Yeah.
What safeguards have you put in place to ensure that, for instance, maybe you have a state coordinator officer for a particular state, say Cross River in the south-south, Kanu, Kaduna, southeast, southwest. What safeguards have you put in place to ensure that at this state's level, the state government do not divert it and make it a political thing? For instance, if a state is dominated by APC, for instance, when they get to that state, it becomes an APC affair. If it is dominated by ABGA, it becomes an ABGA affair. If it's dominated by PDP, it becomes a PDP affair. But this program is meant for all Nigerians. What safeguards have you put in place to ensure that at the implementation level, which is core to the people, it is not downplayed?
Okay, so as I was explaining, you establish the state offices, and these state offices are manned by civil servants, not politicians. And at the local government level, local government staff are also employed or deployed to work as community-based targeting teams. The list, as generated by the community, it's actually coordinated by the local government staff who enumerate. Now, One of the safeguards put in place is the fact that we are working with community-based organizations, CBOs, who are non-government, non-partisan, that monitor the process. Okay. We monitor the process, they monitor the process. Okay. And to ensure the integrity of this register, we use what we call we combine a combination of 3 targeting mechanisms. The first is the geographical mapping. And this geographical mapping is taken from the Bureau of Statistics data that ranks local governments across the country from the poor to the poorest. So for each state, we take the 30% poorest local governments to start developing the register in. Now, no state government or no state governor is able to influence the choice of local government in his state. I work under the office of the Vice President, and this is where I will also give credit to the current administration. I've not had any influence from the government of the day that you're going into this state. Yep. Start with this local government. It has not happened. It's based on the poverty mapping of Nigeria as done by the statistics from the Bureau of Statistics. Okay. Once that mapping is agreed and the local governments are selected, we then recruit local government staff who are the people to work with.
Because experience has shown that government comes up with a lofty project like this, yes, very bright, and towards where the people should benefit, it becomes blurred by selfish individuals. We're happy with this plan.
Yeah, that's why this is from bottom up, and is the community. Yep. And that's the integrity of the register. It rests with the community. Okay. Only the community members select or identify poor households that come onto the register. Okay. And we also take time, because you also argue that within the community, there might be influencers. There might be those who are more vocal than the others. That's why we split them into 3 groups.
For instance, if I go to a community, for instance, yes, I don't know your criteria, and I imagine to see maybe the village head or the community head or the king, as the case may be, or the monarch in charge of that community. I don't expect to find that monarch's relative on the list. Because
not at all, except the community identifies such a relative as being poor and vulnerable. Okay. Because that's why it's 3 groups, separate groups.
Let's move on
now. The influence cannot be across the 3 groups.
Let's move on now. This project, where are we with it? I know it was established in 2017. Before we go into the specifics now, where are we? Are we still at the planning stage? Have we reached like maybe the 70th percentage of the project?
So we're not, we've left planning stage long ago. We have a memorandum of understanding with 36 states and Abuja. Okay. We have established offices in all the 36 states and Abuja. We have trained and we are collecting data in all the 36 states except 2 who just established their own offices. And in all of these states, as soon as they collect the data, they send it up here, we clean it, and we accept it or sort of approve it onto the social register. And I said we have a total of 655,000 poor and vulnerable households across 26 states. Other states' data are being cleaned as we speak, and they will be uploaded.
Sorry, just from for the layman's understanding, when you say are being cleaned, do you mean verification?
Of course, verification. Okay, because you see, when you identify the poor households, the team then goes to this household to take the information of the household. And it's taken not only from the head of the household. It's the head of the household, the woman, that's the wife, and all the children and the dependents. Okay. And you see, the catch again, when you argue around the integrity of it, the enumerator cannot,
and key.
Yes, the enumerator cannot bring anybody on the list except he cites the person. So he will continue to go to that household until he identifies and he can physically see each member of the household and take the information from that person directly. So the register is first built on the poor household, but there are individuals. At the moment, we have about 2.4 million individuals within this 655,000 households. Okay. And each individual information is taken from their name to the age, to the sex, to what kind of vocation the person is involved in. Okay. So across board. So for instance, I can tell you offhand, looking at the register, the number of people living with disability, for instance, within the register, the number of those above 75 years old, those who are engaged in farming, those who are engaged in petty trading. So we can do all of that analysis, and that's why I started by saying it's an information gateway for potential beneficiaries into any social intervention programs. So if you are targeting only farmers and you want to do an intervention for poor farmers, those who are actually poor, you can get that information from the register of farmers who are extremely poor and belong to the lower pyramid of our the lower level of the poverty pyramid. That you can then target that kind of intervention.
Before we go back to the bigger picture, let's come down to, I hear there is a Social Protection Cross-Learning Summit, SPECS 2019.
Yes.
In the pipeline, right?
Yes, it is.
When are we expecting that?
It's scheduled to hold start from the 22nd of January to the 24th of January. It's being organized by the Federal Ministry of Budget and National Planning, who, of course, is the custodian of the social protection policy and have been leading in the social protection space in Nigeria. Recognizing the central role NASCO plays, we were invited by the ministry to act as a secretariat to that conference. And plans have been top gear. We are expecting the Honorable Minister of Planning to open the summit on Tuesday the 22nd. And on the 24th, that is the end, we're expecting the Vice President, His Excellency, Professor Yemi Osinbajo.
So what does it
and
aim
the
to
other
achieve,
ministers.
this SPECS program?
The first SPECS in 2016 brought together practitioners across the whole country in the social protection space. And they, part of the communique of that meeting was to establish a policy for social protection for Nigeria and also establish a community of practice. The social protection policy itself was worked on by, of course, the Ministry of Budget and Planning with the support of other partners. And in late 2017, that policy was approved by the Federal Executive Council. Now we have a social protection policy. The ministry will ask what next for us to roll it out. So the summit is aimed to bring again practitioners to learn from each other, but also develop what we could call a social protection agenda for the country that will go on for the next 2 years. It is expected that this summit will be holding every 2 years. We'll be looking at issues that speaks to the policy in terms of how do you translate this from policy to practice? How do you roll this out? And then identifying for the country what are the priority areas that we should channel our energies to in the next 2 years. Once this is all agreed by the practitioner, we have a communique that lists out that, okay, for us, for the social protection policy and the rollout of activities of the social protection, here are the immediate priorities, A, B, C, D, E, F.
Let me hold it there. When you say practitioners, who do you refer to here? When you say the social protection practitioners, is it the beneficiaries or what?
Practitioners, of course, those who are implementing government, private sector, NGOs who are rolling out social protection programs. So we have quite a number of them out there. We have governments who have been doing social interventions in one way or the other. We have Osun State government who's done their own school feeding program and other social interventions. We have Jigawa State government that is looking at their own cash transfer program other than that of the federal government. You have other governments that have done quite a lot. There are governments who are doing things on, like I think Kano State government that is giving cash stipends or access to health for people living with disability. These are social intervention programs. We've learned from this, and we're asking everyone that's within the space. We have non-governmental organizations like Save the Children who have been doing an intervention in the north for pregnant women and lactating mothers, giving monthly 4,000 cash stipend to them. There are experiences and evidences that have been generated through these programs that is sustainable. They will come, they will share their experiences from the point of view of the Nigerian state. Which direction do we want to go with social protection in the next 2 years? Now, the federal government, led by President Buhari, has been very, very, ambitious in this space. For the first time in our country, we've seen a very ambitious investment, a budget of 5 billion naira every year since 2015 in the social investment space. where we see school feeding program, the small loans through JEEP, the Empower, and the cash transfer program. All of these programs are investment in the social protection space. We have learned from them. What then will be the priority for Nigeria going forward? Given that we now have a framework that has been approved by the government, how do we tie all of this in and say, okay, in the next 2 years, here is where their investment should lie, so that any partner, UNICEF, DFID, USAID, UN, anyone that is coming to work with the Nigerian government in the space, what should be their priority? Where should they be investing in? Okay. Now, that coordinated approach will help this country. Like, you know, we are a people who we might say we are suffering from pilotitis, where every program is a pilot. We pilot everywhere. And at the end of the day, we do not really collect it into whole or scale. But in the social protection place, we've learned what can we scale meaningfully from some of these experiences that we have.
Now, moving on, very relative here, until we had a national emergency and funding came from so many multinationals, but where to sink that fund and spread became a problem. Now, when projects like this or initiatives like this are muted, is there a law backing it currently?
Not a moment. Now,
a policy without a law, there's a tendency of having a logjam somewhere.
Of course.
And beautiful project like the one will expect that it should outlive the administration that muted it. It should even have a larger-than-life personage. In the next 40 years, it can run and roll over seamlessly. So what plans are in place to ensure that there's a law backing it, to give it that backup, so that even after all the administration that muted it, it will outlive it?
Of course, the vision is for NASCO, for instance, to outlive. It will. We will say that in the fact that the structures are being put in place towards that. First, it's a policy, the social protection policy. Now, in the summit, the decision might be taken, is it a priority to move it to the law stage by the National Assembly? If that is the priority identified by governments, you know, all the 36 states of the Federation and Abuja will be in Abuja looking at this together. If it is a priority that this passing it as a law, you see the first priority, then that's what we'll be working on in the next 2 years, to see how we translate it from the policy stage to a law that will be passed by the National Assembly. If it is that, okay, perhaps it takes us a while to get the law in place, let's begin to implement and produce results. Results that then produce that evidence that we need to convince the various stakeholders that it is indeed one of the most viable strategy to poverty alleviation. Then it will be that. Because we need to come from a point of view of evidence. If, for instance, we're given cash, when the National Cash Transfer Office is giving 5,000 naira cash to poor and vulnerable households in the country, there are arguments that, is that the way to go to dash folks' money? And people will say, rather than, why don't you carry the Abacha loot and invest in building roads, building schools, and why do you want to put it into a cash transfer? Then where is the evidence that sort of convinces you that the 5,000 naira that is given to that poor household in the village actually translates to economic development? An instance is this. There is evidence in this country from other programs, that the one I spoke about, Save the Children, that when you give 4,000 naira to the poor woman, pregnant woman in the village in Jigawa State or Zamfara State, that woman uses 69% of that money on consumption. And hearing, what is consumption? Basic food needs, medicines. And so this woman takes it to the market to buy basic food stuff like rice. What does that do to the manufacturing sector? Suddenly there is demand because people have the money to buy the rice. So he's got to produce more. And then he got to employ people to produce the rice.
Let me interject a bit. Now, overall, you say key outputs and outcomes, collation of relevant data on social protection in Nigeria, a functional knowledge base from social protection programs in Nigeria, coalition buildings to TWG, I don't know what it means, on SP in Nigeria.
Technical Working Group.
Okay. Draft SP agenda for Nigeria. Do you think 4 days are enough for this?
In forums like this, you will always argue that the time is always not...
This is deep.
Yes.
And huge.
Yes. Of course, there are work being done by those concerned. For instance, there is a DEX review going on at the moment of what is out there within the space. There are a couple of studies that have already been run. The National Social Investment Office is already working on a roadmap for social investment that first did an assessment, a situation analysis of the space, and brought out data on what exists in the country. There is a social protection inventory study that is happening at the moment, where we're identifying projects or initiatives that could easily be classified as social protection initiatives in the country. Okay. All of these reports will come together, and that's why the summit is there for learning. These people who are doing all of these studies will have an opportunity to share their findings, their evidence. Okay. And so this summit will allow us then collate this information and say, okay, here is the best practice for A or B. And all of this will pull together. And then we're able to identify that, okay, from all of these experiences that we shared and the evidence is generated, here is, for us, what should be our priority. Now, your question was right that, okay, is there a law backing this? We have a policy. But from a layman point of view and from my point of view, I would say the next thing is for me to take this policy to the National Assembly to give me a law to back its operations. Okay. But it will also interest you to know that someone else will argue that no, perhaps that's not the priority. The priority is for me to see how we consolidate on the social investment programs that are currently ongoing in the country to ensure that they outlive this current space we're in.
Exactly.
Perhaps that's the priority. Or perhaps the priority is to see that all other states adopt this policy. Because we're a federation. It's a social protection policy for the federal government of Nigeria, approved by the Federal Executive Council. Does this interest other states to buy in?
That takes me to another concern now. Now, there's always this concern of control, territorial control.
Yes.
You have states that have taken up with these projects. You mentioned a couple of them. And now you're trying to harmonize or mainstream your activities. When a particular state governor who has started his own, or the state government's project, because it's not his own now, it's a state government project, had gone thus far, and the federal one comes, don't you think there'll be conflict somewhere at some point?
No.
Because, hey, the state government, for instance, want to rule out its achievement from this direction. You want to rule out your achievement from this particular direction. So if there's no point of harmony, I see conflict there.
No, from the point of view of NASCO and the programs that we coordinate, the programs are actually implemented by the state. They are state-owned.
Whether they existed before or
not.
Okay.
So when I talk about the social register, it is first a state register. All we do here is collate the state registers into a national social register.
What about the states that never had before?
The state that never had before, we're working with them to develop one.
Okay. So in sum, it means you are going to partner with the state does not in any way knock off what the states were doing before.
No, not in any way. Rather, it complements them. Okay. Now, a state, you can give some examples. There are states that...
You're in a better position to give me examples.
Yes. I mean, there are states in this country who have had social intervention programs. I mentioned Osun State, for instance. The federal government school feeding program knock off the state initiative, for instance? Okay. No, it complemented it. I mean, in Jigawa State, where the school feeding program is going on, the state government has decided that while the federal government is doing primary 1 to 3, they would do primary 4 to 6, for instance. It didn't knock it off. It complements it. So we are all partners in progress, and that's why the first step for us as NASCO, for what we have remit on, is to enter a memorandum of understanding with the state, where we sit with the state and say, look, here is what we're putting on the table. Here are our expectations of you.
Okay.
The state also come out that, okay, here are my own expectations. We all agree and we sign the agreement. Then it stands as a document guiding our relationship.
Okay.
We rely on them to develop the social register that is sent to us. And we, after data verification or validation, we then approve it to be our national social register, where folks mind to do interventions. So it's a relationship that does not knock off anyone's priority, but we have a shared understanding that here is a people of Nigeria, the poor and vulnerable that these programs are targeted in. It's the responsibility of every government. It's the interest of every government to see that the activities implemented are seamless,
okay,
in a way that the benefits and the impact is to the people.
Is there at any point in this whole plan where, I know I'm happy you have talked about working hand in sync with the CBOs, the NGOs working with you, and I hope they are not just portfolio NGOs. They are active NGOs.
They are not.
Okay.
I can assure you that
Now,
they are not.
Is there a situation where, for instance, at some point you say, okay, let us outsource the services to the NGOs to handle? Are you working towards that?
Implementation does not belong to NASCO. There are different implementation bodies.
Okay, can you educate us on this?
So we coordinate.
Okay.
NCTO, like National Cash Transfer Office, for instance, is an implementation body.
Beautiful.
So they implement the program. We provide standards and guidelines.
Okay.
We provide support to the implementers.
In the course of coordinating, you have, for instance, sanctions for those who become maybe an affront to the process.
It is at the discretion. So when we notice or we identify any, there are, of course, safeguards.
Okay.
There are standard operating procedures that we develop that guides operations. For instance, for data, when NCTO or any intervention mine the data from the National Register, there is a standard operating procedure that guides the integrity of that information that they receive from us. When they go to register beneficiaries, it is required that they give us a feedback on the data.
Okay.
It's also required that they come back with the register to match against the social register that confirms to everyone that those who are registered under the cash transfer actually were taken from the National Social Register. Where they are not, they will be dropped immediately.
Okay. Now, somebody is listening to you talk about this program that is coming up.
Yes.
And it's quite a novel for a number of persons who want to be engaged in this to be involved.
Yes.
Is it open to everybody?
Yes, of course. It's open to those who have interest in it. There is an online registration handle, SPECS, that's SPECS 2019 to 2018 2018 Nigeria handle, and you can Google it, and there's a registration handle that you would then register to participate. Now, like every conference, there's a limit to the number we will take. We will not take 1 million people, then becomes a jamboree, and you can't get any meaning out of it.
So the numbers is the registration
are
free?
Yeah, the registration is free. Of course, it's free. We're looking at having about 400 participants from all walks of life across the country within the social protection space. We've had interest from people outside of the country too. We've received submission, abstract submission from people from Malawi, Ethiopia, Uganda, Brazil, Mexico, and who also want to come share their experiences. This is the beauty of a conference like this. You allow both internal and external players who share their experiences. And for us, as a body, we look at harnessing these experiences and the evidences generated thereof to be able to then put a whole together to say, for us, here are our priorities. Learning from these other experiences, here is what will be good for us. And we agree on it, and we'll get the sign-off of the government and those implementing to run with it.
I know we have since moved on from that question. Imagine in the process along the line, you realize that a particular state is deviating in terms of this project is meant for all Nigerians. And maybe because this particular state is dominated by a particular political party, they want to play politics with it. What happens?
Okay, I will continue to maintain with you that this process is non-partisan.
This is an electioneering here.
Yeah.
Yes, in as much as a particular party is at a national level, it is off for all Nigerians in terms of governance. But people tend to deviate at times.
Okay, I'll give you an example. Abia State is PDP.
Sure.
But we have a register in Abia State.
And it's not been
Cross River State is PDP, right? If I'm correct.
Sure.
Yeah. We have a register in Cross River.
And it's not
we
been
have
abused.
a cash transfer in Cross River. We have a skills for job program in Cross River. It has never been abused in any way. And I'll give credit to the governors. No single governor has come to me to insist that I want you to go to this particular local government to start a register. They have allowed that transparent scientific process of selecting LGAs to start with through the geographical mapping identified by the poverty map by the statistics Bureau of Statistics to hold sway. I've never had any governor come to me to insist, and I'm going to give credit to the governors. I'll give credit to the president, the vice president. He has not.
What about the NGOs?
And the NGOs themselves have never, none of the NGOs have come to me that because we are the foot soldiers and the people on the ground, we know where the poor people are, come and follow us to this place. Yeah. No, you will follow the process. It's a scientific process. A combination of 3 targeting mechanisms. The geographical mapping that identify local governments based on their degree of poverty, where we then start, to the community that select, to the proxy mean test.
As a very last word, what will you say if I ask you after your spec engagements?
Yes.
Where will we see this project or this coordination or what you're doing in the next 1 year after specs 2019?
Next 1 year, so I'll speak to it in 2 components. Component 1, the social register. We expect to have the social register in all the states of the federation. At least 30% of the poorest LGAs in each state will have the social register. That is our target. In terms of coordination, we want to be better at providing the policy guidelines and building the standards that ensures the integrity of the program that we're implementing. To answer your question on being partisan or being controlled by parties, we'll exert more efforts in building those standards that ensure the integrity of the process and the programs that we're implementing in the states.
Thank you very much, Mr. Iowa Akpera.
Thank you very much.
National Coordinator, National Social Safety Net, Coordinating Office, NASCO. It was nice having you on Insight.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
That's that on this segment of the program. Up next is the media review segment. Stay with us.
Thank you for remaining with us on Insight. This is the media review segment. On December 20, 2018, the Nigerian National Assembly adjourned with plans to reconvene on Wednesday, January 16, 2019. Within this period, there were political tensions among members, especially the leadership. Now, within the recess period, political parties started their campaigns and meetings, and now the legislative arm reconvenes. It leaves the questions to be answered. What will be the mood like when they resume, and will some of the bills still pending suffer setback? Anyway, National Assembly correspondent and producer parliamentary guide on the NTA, Ignatius Nkwo, is with us and will be our guide. Ignatius, thanks for coming around.
You're welcome, Cecil.
The resumption of the National Assembly, people are talking about it. Now, with the whole political gymnastic in the country, what picture do you paint of the National Assembly as it reconvenes, considering the fact that before they left, they had this leadership tussle, some members defected, some didn't get tickets to return. What do you envision the mood to be like as the members resume?
Well, you know, the parliament is the house of the people. And then that is where you see the macrocosm of the whole political system in every nation. And then the resumption of the National Assembly in this year Christmas and New Year break is not even as tense as it was during the long recess, the annual recess. That was when they had these permutations we are talking about. But that had, for now, that had quelled down in the parliament, because even before that long recess, that was when they were angling to go for primaries, and the results came up and things like that, and all these misalignment or realignment among members and party affiliation. And you know, in parliament, party is very, very supreme in parliament world over. Like you see what's happening in the US Congress. Nancy Pelosi is back. Party alignment and realignment. You can't play down on party affiliation in parliament. Well, in this recess, there's no tension, so to say, because even before they went on recess, people who are already lost out in the primaries are already lost out. And that was where they had some challenges, issues of alignment and realignment before the Christmas and New Year holidays. But this time, most of them already know their stance, they already know their position in the political equation of the nation. So some of them who had already lost in their primaries, some of them switched to other parties before this recess. So the recess, at this point, within the recess, there was no any other political alignment of a candidature of moving to another party to contest from another, because the window had already closed before this recess.
Yes, well, you're right. You know, when they had the long recess, that's when the whole tension of, and then the postponement of resumption, and then the resume and everything all started.
Exactly.
Now, it's obvious that we wouldn't have a full house. Do you even see half of members coming to resume as they resume, or maybe a third?
Yeah, it's always the question that most observers and followers of parliamentary activities always ask world over. You know, when there is election years for parliament are always very precarious. Most times you see people begin to play truants in parliament. And then for those people who have already felt, like in the National Assembly, you have more than 200 members not coming back to the National Assembly. And you know what that means. And then when you see people are not coming back to the National Assembly, and for some people who might be in parliament for their own personal gains, they really get the issue of legislative activities, which is the primary function of parliament in the constitution. And you see some of them will feel, well, what's the sense of coming to the parliament? But for those who actually know why they are in the parliament, who are there to serve the people, you see some of them will still be coming. But you know, parliament most times, plenary is not just the only activities, legislative activities that they indulge. Yes, sometimes they have committee works, and most times when you don't see people in parliament, people who watch them over the television, they will feel that some of these people are not working. No, even in the Western world, the US Congress, the British Parliament, you see sometimes in the plenary, as long as there's a quorum, there might not be all of them. Some of them are busy working in the committee works. Now, for instance, for the National Assembly, the quorum is two-thirds.
Two-thirds.
For the Senate, yes, must be at least 38 senators. In the House of Representatives, at least 106 and above. That is what it should be.
Wait, it's two-thirds for the Senate.
Yes,
that's
both of them two-thirds.
Yeah, two-thirds.
Yes.
So at the Senate, it should be 70-something.
No, at the Senate must at least from 38.
But that's not two-thirds,
and above.
is it?
That's two-thirds. Two-thirds of 109, yes.
Just two-thirds of 109?
Yes, if you remember the last before they went on recess, there was a disadjournment that the Senate had because they were not up to a quorum. You know, they come in and discover that they had just 10, 15 members, 15 senators, and the Senate cannot sit. Because the implication is, the Senate standing rule 10 order 1 says, if you are sitting and you did not meet the quorum, any legislative activity, any product of that legislation could be contested for in court. And so it's very dicey if you pass any legislation when the legislators did not meet up with the quorum. Remember what happened? There was a time Nancy Pelosi was passing the bill on health in the US. That was what happened. They were not up to a quorum. And some of the Republicans then were insisting that bill should go ahead and pass. But she stood it down. And she knows why she stood it down. If it had gone, if it had passed, remember that bill later had a problem. If it had passed, in the end of the day, they will contest it that it's not the senators, the members of the legislators did not meet up with the quorum to pass that piece of legislation.
Okay, at least now we know if they're up to 38. Well, I believe they should get up to 38 at the...
Nancy, you can't just say.
Really tell, right?
This is the last lap of politicking.
I'm even worried about the speaker, the Senate president himself, who is actually championing the campaign of the main opposition party. Well,
the deputy Senate president can as well preside.
Can as well preside.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let's see how that goes. Now, statistics from the National Assembly has it that about 219 bills so far been passed, with hundreds of others still pending. Do you foresee some of these major ones suffering setbacks, especially as they'll be rounding up soon?
Yes, exactly. You know, bill passage is a process, and it's not just a day thing. But sometimes there are certain bills that come because of the exigency of that bill and because of its national importance and its urgency. Such bills can pass within 1 week, within 2 weeks. It happens. For instance, you see the National Assembly has just told the executive that once the president brings in the national minimum wage bill, that they are ready to pass it within 1 week. These are exceptions you have. You can do it. You don't even call for public hearing. There and then you read the first reading, second reading, and then you come back. The committee brings it for the committee of the whole, and it's passed for third reading. You give to the president. This is an executive bill which originates from the president. Automatically, you are sent to it. Good.
What's the state of the petroleum bill?
Yeah, that's what I'm coming. I want you to know that the fact that bills most times they have a process they must pass, but except if the ones that has to do with emergency. Now we have certain bills already in the legislative mills that most Nigerians expected that those bills must come. However, some of those bills emanated from the 6th Assembly, like the petroleum industry bill. Now, in the 8th Assembly, there are certain bills, major bills that Nigerians expect that those bills should be addressed, considered before the wind of this assembly. We have the petroleum industry bill, which has been christened Petroleum Industry Governance Bill. We have the Gender Equality Bill. We have the Commerce Company and Allied Matters Act Bill. We have the discrimination against people living with disability bill. And we have the 2019 appropriation bill. That is the budget.
Wow.
So these are really
very
pressing issues on the legislative mill to be considered by the members of the National Assembly.
Well, I don't know. How many months do they have before they are?
Well, they will have to remain in the National Assembly as members till June 8th.
Okay, well, let's hope that we can see most of at least these 5 major ones scale through. I don't know how it's going to happen.
But the petroleum industry bill, one of them has been passed.
The president presented the 2019 budget in the National Assembly amidst a whole lot of drama. Tell us, what's the state, what do you foresee? What do you think will happen to it when the Assembly resumes? Okay,
well, the presentation of the budget before the joint session of the National Assembly, as provided by the Constitution, is one of the significant steps of the appropriation process. Once the president presents it, it's deemed to have been read for the first time. Every bill must be read for the first time. Now, when they come back, the next thing they should do is to bring it. Remember the day the president presented it, no member was allowed to comment on it, make contributions. Then the next time they will read it on the floor, members will talk on it. That is deemed to be second reading. And at that point in time, it will be referred to the Committee on Appropriation and Finance. And then that is when you see they begin to invite MDAs to come into the National Assembly to defend the budget they've proposed.
It's going to be a very busy one.
Yes,
I need to know how these guys are going to juggle politics and this together.
Yes, that's the problem. That's the problem. But you know that the 2018 budget will still have to run till towards May. You know, so on their own part, if they want to give us a later hearing, they will still meet up.
Ignatius Nko, you've educated us a lot about this, but be sure that we're going to bring you back on. We have still so much to talk about. Maybe after the resumption. No Thank you very much, Ignatius Nko, the correspondent from the National Assembly, and of course producer, political guide, parliamentary guide on the NTA. This has been the Media Review segment. In a moment, I will back on with Omini for the concluding part of Insights.
Well, within the ambit of the Sustainable Development Goals, which says get everyone involved, we believe they have talked so much about the youth, the people. I always talk about the aged. Who is not aging? You always age and get to a particular age band. As I am now, I'm in a particular age band. So let them get involved. Cecil?
What age band are you?
Well, I'm between the age band of 40 to 60.
All right, for me, I'll say at the end, it's been quite insightful on the discussion segment, and of course the media review segment on social protection, and of course the media review segment we've learned a lot. Very importantly, the bill should not suffer, the people should not suffer, and politicians should just do their business.
The beauty about it is that whether there is a mild drama or fisticuff, it is called in the parliament the beauty of democracy. The
beauty of democracy indeed.
Well, that's that on the program today. I believe we tried to make it insightful for you because you have always made it happen for us. On behalf of all of us, thanks for watching. Cecil?
It's bye-bye from me.